Thank you. All right. How was your flight?
It's good.
Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for Off the Record. My name's Ed Corrigan. I'm the president of the Conservative Partnership Institute. We do these. Mike, we do these gatherings once a month. So if any of you are not on our list, please contact us for future events. Our host tonight is the great Mary Margaret Olohan, Daily Wire's White House correspondent and author of D-Trans: True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideological Cult. Our guest speaker tonight is Alex Bruesewitz. As former Trump advisor, Alex travels the country and the globe giving speeches on behalf of the MAGA movement. He's the author of Winning the Social Media War: How Conservatives Can Fight Back, Reclaim the Narrative, and Turn the Tides Against the Left. We're thrilled to have Mary Margaret and Alex, two strong leaders in the movement. Enjoy the evening.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for flying in to be here with us, and congratulations, you just got married. Is that right?
Yes, I did, and thank you very much, and thank you to CPI for having me.
So I wanted to get into a lot of topics here because there's so much ground we could cover. But before we dove in, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your origin story, because I know it started with President Donald Trump. You're interested in the digital world.
Yeah.
How did you get started?
So I was actually sitting in study hall in Ripon, Wisconsin in April of 2015. I just turned 18 years old, and I was bored, like always, in class. And so I tweeted a picture of Trump's hotel in Chicago, and I said the sign on Trump Chicago would look just as good in the White House. I left school that day thinking nothing of it. And then around 11 o'clock at night, while I was playing NBA 2K probably, Donald Trump retweeted that post. And so the next day at school, I was like, dude, Trump retweeted me. And there was like, nobody cares. But I cared. A month after that interaction, I graduated high school. A month after I graduated high school, Donald Trump announced he was running for president for the first time. And, I wasn't very smart, and I still aren't. I'm still not very smart. So I didn't have plans to go to college. And so I was trying to sell real estate while simultaneously being a full-time Twitter troll in support of Donald Trump. And so during that campaign, I started building up a little bit of a following, made some great friends along the way, including Charlie Kirk, the late, great Charlie Kirk. So started building a little bit of a following. And then in October of 2016, I volunteered to knock on doors for Trump in North Carolina, which was a fun experience. I enjoyed being a social media troll more than being a door knocker, to be honest. But after he won that November and he was inaugurated that January, the following January, I started my company X Strategies with zero political experience, zero political connections. And the goal was to help conservatives communicate better online in the age of Trump. And so I would offer to manage social media accounts of anybody who would take a meeting with me. And I'd say, if you pay me $1,000 a month, I will make you famous on social media. And some, took chances on me. To this day, I have one client who's been with me since the beginning. It's called Freedom Project Academy. It's a Christian conservative homeschool academy in Oshkosh or Appleton, Wisconsin. And they pay me $1,000 a month to manage their Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. And don't tell my other clients, but they've been grandfathered into that set rate for all this time. But so what I wanted to do is help conservatives communicate better online, because that was something that I felt like only the president was doing effectively at that moment. And so we started getting some more exciting clients over the years. We had a great election cycle in 2020 with great, she's not so great anymore, which is disappointing. But Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of my most viral clients at that moment. I started working with Marjorie that year. She had 2,000 Twitter followers, and we took her all the way up to about 600,000 by the time she walked into Congress that year. And so we started getting a little bit recognition. And following that election cycle, or following that election, a lot of conservatives were leaning away from President Trump because they thought he lost. I didn't think he lost. I thought the 2020 election was rigged. I'm sure the great patriots in this room agree with me. And so my profile kind of went from a behind the scenes social media operator to more of an outspoken advocate, public advocate of the president, and ultimately got on the radar of the family and then him.
Now, we know you were very involved in the 2024 election cycle, well before that as well. But can you talk to us about how you developed the president's podcast strategy? What your thought process was when approaching some of these podcasts like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn?
Well, believe it or not, there's a great list called the Spotify rankings, right? And you can go on and see who the most popular podcasts are. And it's rocket science, right? And so we had this idea that the president should probably start reaching out to untraditional means. And the president also has some incredible friends, including Dana White, the founder of UFC. And so Dana White actually sent us contact information for some of the biggest podcasters, including Theo Vaughn. And it was my job then to get in contact and then convince the president to get on them. And so the first person I actually reached out to on the list that Dana White sent over was Theo Vaughn. And I cold called him and I said, "Hey, Theo, this is Alex Bruesewitz with President Trump." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this, he's like, I've been trying to get in touch with you guys, been trying to get you on, get him on." And he was really excited. And he's like talking to me about the things that he wanted to discuss with the president. One being combating addiction. Theo struggled with addiction, and he was very familiar with the president's family's struggles, including his brother. And so he was very passionate. We really wanted to talk to him about what he intends on doing. And the administration just rolled out a great plan of combating addiction. But so we got Theo on board, and then it came to getting the president on board. And, for those of you who follow Theo Vaughn, he's a little bit of an interesting character. And the president is used to, television hosts who wear suits and talk very properly. And so
do you have to show him clips of Theo?
I didn't actually. So I called the president. He was on the golf course, and I was in my office. And I called him. I said, "Hey, sir." He said, "Hey, Alex, how we doing?" And I said, "Great." And he's like, "How are the numbers looking?" I said, "Great, sir, as always. I'm calling because I want to pitch you on doing an interview with a very popular comedian named Theo Vaughn." And he goes, "You like him, Alex?" And I said, "I do." And I said, "He's got a huge following, tens of millions of followers. He's really hot right now." And he goes, "Call Barron. And if Barron likes it, we'll do it." And so that's what I did. I called Barron, and he's like, "Dude, of course." And we got it lined up. And he did so well on that interview that he wanted to keep doing more and more and more, because what I would do after he would go on, I would showcase how many views it got on YouTube. And then I would also showcase how many views the clips got. And the media would cover it. They were lazy. The media is very lazy. You're not lazy, but most of the media is lazy. So they'll just go to YouTube and they'll say, "This interview got 3 million views." When in reality, it got 3 million views on YouTube, maybe. Actually, that one, I think, got 15 million views, but who's counting? But the clips from it got hundreds of millions of views. The one clip in particular that I think might have broke records was when Theo Vaughn was educating the president on cocaine.
I remember that.
And I think, I traveled to many different countries over the last year, and everybody in these foreign countries, like, it was hilarious when Theo Vaughn was talking about cocaine with Trump. I'm like, don't do cocaine, by the way. But we would just reach huge amounts of people with limited, effort and limited time. And so the president wanted to start doing more and more of these. And so we leaned on friends like Dana White. We leaned on friends like John Shahidi, who's the manager of the Nelk Boys. And I would just reach out to these guys and I say, send us all and every contact information you can. And then I would kind of be the liaison between that world and the president.
So the internet has this very strong fascination with Barron Trump. What can you share with us about him, about his role he played in this process? What was his top podcast that he wanted the president on?
Well, Barron is I like all of the legends of Barron, the stories of Barron on social media. So I want them all to be true. So I don't want to give away any secrets. But he's a
You should. Tell us.
incredible young man, brilliant young man. I mean, he's grown up in politics. He's grown up in this, and so he really has an understanding of the process of the voters and young people. And so the president also views me as close to Barron's age. I'm 9 years older than Barron, but he's very impressive. All of his kids are impressive, and they all played a role. But for Barron's in particular, Barron really wanted the president to do Patrick Bet David's podcast. Barron's very business savvy as well, and so he loves Patrick Bet David's podcast.
Interesting. Now, why didn't you want the president to do Call Her Daddy?
Well, she lied about it, by the way. She was doing this New York Times forum, similar to what we're doing here, but with I have better looking people. But she was doing this New York Times forum right after the election, and she was like, Trump's people reached out to me and they wanted us on, and that never happened. There was no interaction with Call Her Daddy other than her team emailing us, inviting us on. And there's a couple of reasons why. A lot of the podcasters that we went on, what I found to be equal opportunity critics. They criticized Trump, but they also criticized the other side. With Call Her Daddy, Alex Cooper, there's not a single podcast where she criticized the Democrats when there's substantially more material to criticize them. But she had a podcast that came out a few months prior titled Dating in the Age of Diddy and Trump. I mean, come on. And so there was no interest in that. And also, I'm not a big fan of, I don't think her show really resembles the type of voter that we were looking for. We were looking for, women who wanted to have families and mothers and, women who weren't necessarily degenerates.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, switching gears a little bit, looking at how things played out, what role did TikTok play in this election? And I know you love to compare the Trump numbers versus the Kamala numbers, the Biden numbers. Talk to us about that whole situation and the role that played in the election.
TikTok was massive. And so before the president joined TikTok, a New York Times piece came out that showcased how by a 2-to-1 margin, Trump was more popular than Biden on the platform. And that was stunning numbers because we thought that it's a youth-dominated platform. There was an assumption that it was very friendly to the left, when in reality, it was very friendly to us. And so it was, Charlie Kirk was like, dude, you're totally missing out by not being on there. And so the president ultimately got on. We hired a guy named TikTok Jack. He was a 21-year-old savage. And I love that kid. But the president also has something called unmatched aura and unlimited riz, two incredible qualities needed to become a TikTok star. And so we felt it was almost negligent to not showcase that on a daily basis on TikTok. And so I think his first post was like 250 million views on TikTok, which was pretty good. And then Kamala's first post, I think she was doing something backstage with the lead singer of NSYNC that nobody remembers. And so the president just crushed it on TikTok just because of who he was and his presence. And one of my personal favorites is we were filming with The Undertaker and Kane, two WWE wrestlers. And a fun stat that I learned along the way is that the WWE has the most engaged with online fan base of any of the major sports leagues, more popular or more engaged with fan base than NFL, NHL, NBA. And so once I learned that, I was like, we definitely need to do a TikTok because, the WWE fans are going to go crazy with it. Either they're going to love it or they're going to hate on it, but either way, it's going to do numbers. And so we had The Undertaker on one side of the couch, Kane on the other side of the couch, and Trump right in the middle. And Kane and The Undertaker, by the way, are like 6'9", maybe taller, big dudes. And they said on November 5th, it's election mania. And we showed a picture. You can be with Kane, The Undertaker, and Trump, or you can be with Batista, who's a far left wrestler who seems to be transitioning genders, by the way, and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. Your choice. thing blew up. It was all over the WrestleMania pages, all over wrestling pages. And so we had a lot of fun with TikTok. And we did better than the Democrats on TikTok because our team was better, but also because our candidate is the coolest person to live in modern time.
I think a lot of people, who are not in the conservative space might assume, based on their liberal bubble on TikTok or something like that, that Trump wasn't that popular based on their bubble that they were in. Do you think that this content permeated those bubbles and people were able to see this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what we were also able to do with this, with our content and with the podcast strategy, is to break this fear mongering narrative that the Democrats like to portray around the president. The Democrats were like, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and he's a dictator. And it's a tough split screen for the Democrats when they're saying this and Donald Trump's on a podcast talking about cocaine with Theo Vaughn, right? or talking about the art of the nickname with Andrew Schulz and how the nickname needs to pew, right? Like, it's very difficult when it's tough to compete with that. And so towards the end of the election, actually, the Democrats kind of dropped that threat to democracy narrative. And, until Madison Square Garden, where they said that was a Nazi rally. And that didn't do so well for them either, by the way. But, it was really important. The TikToks were important. The podcasts were important because it showed a side of the president that a traditional media show wouldn't. And so we got to showcase the side of Trump that we see behind the scenes, having dinner with him, the funny, loving side of the president. And it was able to completely turn the election on its head.
And you think that absolutely contributed to winning that election? I
think it was a major role. It was very easy for the American people to look at in every metric. Was life better under Trump or was life better under Biden? And it was the first election in like 100 years where you had a person who was just president prior and the incumbent running against each other. And so basically every metric, people checked the box and said Trump was better.
Now, looking at the 2028 field on the Democrat side, who do you think has the most effective digital strategy right now?
Certainly not the fat ass J.B. Pritzker. What a terrible week for J.B. Pritzker, by the way. First his cousin Tom had to resign from Hyatt because of his close relationships with a pedophile named Jeffrey Epstein. And now it was just announced that the Chicago Bears look like they're leaving Chicago after 105 years for Northwest Indiana. And all J.B. Pritzker can do is, tweet. And also, by the way, like, remember when J.B. Pritzker somehow won like $2.1 million at a casino? Like, that guy has a lot of issues. And so he's been having a really bad week. AOC's also had a terrible week on digital. She was exposed in Munich for what we all know her to be as not a very smart person. And she decided to take that on a global stage, and while simultaneously like placing stories along the way, saying this is her big foreign policy debut. And she totally flopped. And, the flop was magnified because of her own doing. So, from a digital standpoint, I also think Chris Murphy hits terrible. Washington Post called me the other day and they asked me for my thoughts on how Chris Murphy's social media presence is doing. Do you guys even know who Chris Murphy is? Like not many people do, but they're trying to make Chris Murphy a thing. He never had a beard before, but now he's running for president, so he grows a beard. And they think he looks handsome, but he's been doing this thing where he does this close-up selfie video, and like you can see what he ate for breakfast. You can see, that he hasn't flossed in a few months, and like I don't know who's advising the Democrats on social strategy. I don't know if it's this Parker Butler kid who ran Kamala HQ's disastrous operation or whoever it is. I don't think there's a single Democrat who's effective on social media at the moment.
Really? Not even Gavin Newsom?
Newsome. No, I mean, he's boring. Like he's trying to copy Trump's thing, right? My guess is this idiot that runs his social media. And by the way, like, not to be disrespectful, if any of you guys have a bow tie as your profile picture, I recommend you guys change it. Okay. But this guy has a bow tie as his profile picture. He runs his social media. He's a total moron.
That's not aura.
No aura. Limited, like negative aura. I swear he just tweets like, "This is my idea," and then he puts it in Chat GPT and he says, "Make it sound more like Trump," and then they spit out whatever they do. So like Gavin Newsom, he's boring. Like, and I'm terribly bored of the competition at the moment, and
Interesting.
so I've been doing some other things, but it's kind of boring competition.
Now, you mentioned talking to the Washington Post about the Democrat side of things. Do you ever hear from Democrats who might be interested in you advising their digital strategy?
Well, I don't think that they'd ever reach out to me because they still think I'm a far right extremist who somehow led a riot at the Capitol on January 6th. But I actually met this girl, Daniela something, who ran the podcast strategy for Kamala Harris's campaign, and she was a nice girl. I think she came from YouTube. She was doing YouTube work before she worked for Kamala. And there was this idea after the election that Kamala wasn't doing podcasts and Trump won because he was the only one doing them. That's not true. Like Kamala was actively doing podcasts. The problem with her doing them was that the more people heard from her, the less they liked her. And that's really tough. And so it doesn't really matter what your digital strategy is, what your podcast strategy is, if your candidates suck. And respectfully, like the Democrats, all of their candidates that I'm looking at for 2028 suck. They're bad on policy. They're bad visually. I mean, some are good looking. Like, there's one that's good looking in particular, but she just happens to be the stupid one. So, like they none of them has the full package. And so I think that they're in a tough spot. Who's I find to be quite entertaining actually on the Democrat side is Stephen A. Smith. But he had a role. I think he had a role to play or a lane to kind of bring the Democrats back to the center. But then he takes the bait on so many stupid things and just proves to be just as radically left as some of these other people. So I was actually kind of excited about the prospect of a Stephen A. Smith president, candidacy. But now I'm not as excited because he's proving to be a shit lib, as they say.
So it sounds like you think that a radically left candidate isn't a formidable opponent for the next GOP candidate.
I think that the country's doing well now. I think that the country's going to continue to do better as the president implements his agenda more, and we get a new Fed chair, and things will start, even improving greater than they already are. And so I think it's going to be very difficult for a far left radical lunatic to stunt that momentum. But I do think actually the Democrats are probably going to nominate somebody substantially further left than they ever have before, because that's where their base is. That's where that's where they're going to get their turnout, because they're not going to have this hate Trump vote anymore. Unless I get my way. Like, I'd love to see Trump run again in 2028, but they're going to need to figure out something else that energizes their people. And what we saw in New York is that far left lunacy does energize their people. Will they win? I don't know, but I do think they're actually going to nominate somebody further to the left.
So you say, unless I get my way, is there actually a chance that Trump will run again?
I don't know. There's a lot smarter people in this room than me, so let's ask them.
You're closer to the president.
No comment.
Okay, well then, looking at the 2028 field on the Republican side of things, besides President Trump, who is the full package?
We have a great bench. We have a great roster. The vice president, he's young, he's dynamic, he's smart. He also was incredible on the podcast circuit that he did. He's done Theo Vaughn podcast twice. He did Rogan for a long duration. He did Tim Dillon's podcast. So, he's charismatic. He gets it on social media. His style's a little bit different than the president's. Then you have Marco Rubio, who's incredible. He's been, I think, arguably the best Secretary of State that I've had, at least in my lifetime. And so we're grateful for him. And we're blessed with the bench. We're blessed with talent, at least for that role. Not so much for some of these other roles, to be honest. But at least for that role, I think we're pretty deep compared to the Democrats.
Now, when it comes to Vance, how do you feel as someone who is, an expert in digital strategy when you wake up and the vice president replied to someone on Twitter or, tweeted a meme or something? How does that make you feel?
Well, I enjoy it personally. Game recognizes game. Like it's fun having a Twitter troll as vice president, to be honest. Um, and Vance's Twitter style is much different than mine. I like when he's a little shorter and punchier, but sometimes he posts these novels. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know half the words he uses sometimes. But I think he's very effective on social media, especially compared to his predecessor, Kamala.
That's fair. Now, looking ahead, when we're talking about the midterms, I spent a lot of time with legacy media at the White House. All I hear from them and from a lot of, I would say, legacy liberal commentators is that the midterms are not looking good for Republicans. Hearing that from a lot of Republicans as well. From your perspective, how are the Republicans going to do in the midterms? And is there reason to fear that affordability wasn't focused on enough?
I think affordability has been very focused on. We see gas prices falling. We did. Do any of you guys follow Margot Martin on social media?
I do.
Margot I call her the first White House influencer, and she's incredible. But Margot did this thing on her Instagram story a couple of days ago where she asked her followers to tell her the gas prices in their communities. And, all these people were responding, the lowest prices, like hundreds and hundreds of posts, lowest prices that they've been in years. And so gas prices are falling, grocery prices are falling. With the president's plan to lower housing costs will be implemented, and it'll be great. Then you'll get a new Fed chair. And so the economy is going to be humming. And so any of those Republicans who are saying we're not looking strong in the midterms, well, I can't imagine that they were friendly to us in 2024 and beyond. We call those people rhinos. Some we call losers probably. So, we don't really need the doomers, the panicans rather. What we need really for a Republican Party is effective messengers selling our agenda, talking about the wins, because we have a lot of wins. And the president and the White House, they list out all of our wins. You can go on the White House website and go find them. And so I'm very confident in the midterms. The president is in Rome, Georgia today, turning out the vote. That will be a very important state. Obviously, redistricting. I'm not very happy with the Indiana Republican state legislature, the state Senate there. They totally dropped the ball. But redistricting still, it's going to be fine. I'm confident in our midterm chances, and I don't think the Democrats should be as cocky as they are. It's very rare for the incumbent party, the incumbent presidency's party, to be successful in the following midterms. However, polling indicates we're in a historically strong position, and so I think we'll be in a much stronger position as the months go on.
What do you make of the argument from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or other people in her cohort that negative press about the Epstein files or foreign policy will impact the midterms?
Well, look, I like to see accountability for the Epstein files. By the way, I love to see a fat slob named Reid Hoffman be held accountable. Do you guys know Reid Hoffman? He is the sugar daddy of the Democrat Party. And I'd love to see accountability of his. And this is a Democrat issue, by the way. I think it implicates the Democrats substantially more than any Republican. The president, and it's also important to remember, and for Republicans to explain the fact that the Epstein files are only out because a guy named Donald J. Trump had his Department of Justice arrest a pedophile named Jeffrey Epstein in 2019. And his administration is also one that released these files, and it's completely unredacted. You can see all of the names of the participants, and the president didn't, blur out his name. But it's also showcased. It totally exonerates the president. There's no wrongdoing there. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, will have to explain to the Congress, I think next week, right?
I believe so.
About his dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. I think it's a Democrat issue. And so I don't think Republicans should be fearful of engaging with this. Epstein was arrested by President Trump. The files are released because of President Trump. The files exonerate President Trump. And the Democrats, I think, are the most implicated. And another one is Catherine Rumler. She, all of the press, they kept calling her Goldman Sachs lawyer. Catherine Rumler is one of Barack Hussein Obama's dearest friends. She was the White House counsel for his administration, and she was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend afterwards. So, I think the Epstein files will completely backfire on the Democrat Party, who is pushing it. By the way, they were completely silent on it during the Biden years.
It's true.
So not one post from Thomas Massey or Ro Khanna or any of the radical left lunatics about Epstein during the Biden years. But it was released because of President Trump. And so there's this idea that there's a cover up. There's no cover up. And if anybody engaged in a cover up, it was the previous administration. Trump released the files. Trump arrested Epstein. So Trump looks like the good guy in this. And I think at the end of the day, I also saw that 2% of voters say this is their biggest issue. As far as foreign policy is concerned, I think foreign policy was a major reason why President Trump won in 2024. We saw what was happening across the globe. We saw that there was the conflict in Russia and Ukraine that I know that the president and his team are working really hard to settle. Israel and Gaza. There was chaos every single day across the globe, and President Trump campaigned on a foreign policy message. I will prevent World War III from happening. And people were excited about that. And so he's doing that. So I think it's important for, I don't think that him focusing simultaneously on foreign policy while also doing domestic issues will hurt us during the midterms.
So how are you advising the president heading into the midterm election season? What do you want him focused on?
Well, I'd love to see the president get back to doing some more of the alternative media. He sat down for a podcast interview today in Georgia. He also,
a football podcast,
a football podcast. The president knows ball, by the way, and he actually knows ball. I was sitting with the president. Couple actually this was a Bussin' with the Boys interview, and there was a Thursday night football game on. I think it was Seattle versus 49ers in 2024, and Trump walked into the interview and he started rattling off facts about when Brock Purdy was drafted and where he went to college, and like where did the president of the United States have time to research where this quarterback was drafted or played ball. He follows sports, so he knows ball. But I'd love to see the president getting back to that, and then also doing more of the spontaneous pop-ins. And again, he did that today. He was at a fast food restaurant where he's behind the counter with the fast food worker. It just showcased it. And the people that were working in there were primarily black, and so there's young black fast food workers were smiling ear to ear because they got to interact with the president of the United States. And he has that effect on people. Chris Murphy or JB Pritzker walks in. If JB Pritzker walked into a fast food, they'd be like, "Ah, shit, I'll be cooking food all day." But the president doing those engagements is really effective for him because he has a presence that no other politician has.
Now, I know you've talked about the future of the GOP and how, while the president might not run and he might not be president, we need to preserve the MAGA movement. What does that look like to you? And do you think there need to be people like you safeguarding that MAGA ethos?
Well, I think it's very important if the Republican Party wants to be successful in a post-Trump era, which, even if he's not on the ballot, right? I don't think the post-Trump era is coming anytime soon. So
yeah, he'll be truthing.
But for future elected officials and Republicans running for office, it's very important to continue to run on the MAGA agenda. It's an agenda that attracted such a diverse voter bloc to the party. We had the most unique coalition of all time, from the Maha movement to the crypto bros to young men. We also did 7 points better with young women in 2024 than we did in 2020. And so the president has with black men, with Hispanics, we have an incredibly growing coalition, and that we're all brought together through the MAGA agenda. And so it's strong borders. It's bringing job opportunities back home to our country. It's taking care of what you put in your body in the Maha movement. So there's core pillars of the MAGA movement that must remain in place if the Republican Party wants to be successful long term. As far as having people like me being there to safeguard, God willing, I'll be around for a while. I'm 28 years old, so hopefully I'm not gone next year. But we're going to have great people, whether it's the president's children or cabinet officials or many of you who are inspired by the Trump movement. That my hope is you guys stay in Washington for a long time, or you guys go back home to your wherever you come from and run for office and take the MAGA principles with you.
Now, you're an incredibly loyal defender of the president. I remember seeing you on X, or I think it was Twitter then, during the primary before the last election, really going after DeSantis
What?
supporters and people like
No,
that.
no.
So, how long do you hold those grudges? I'm just curious. Is there
Zero.
like a
The
timeline?
day after the day after Ron DeSantis dropped out, I said, "You guys are wonderful people." Actually, like I don't take I grew up playing video games. Okay, there's something called video game culture, and you put your headset on and you talk shit to your friends. I keep swearing. I'm sorry. My wife sees it, she'll be upset. But you talk crap to your friends all day while you're playing video games, and then you say things that may hurt their feelings, right? But you hang up your headset, all you and your buddies get back on the next day, and you do it again. For me, that's how I've always viewed X. It's the most social media like platform, and so people said nasty things about me on social. I say it back, and vice versa. And for me, it's part of the process. It's part of the game. I don't hold grudges. I don't take things personally. So I think I hurt some feelings on the other side, and they might have taken things personally. But this girl, Christina Pusha, right? There was a piece in Politico that came out in 2022 or 23 saying that she was the best digital operative that the Republican Party had. And I did the Michael Jordan meme, right? Where you sit up in your chair and you're like, okay, I took that one personally. And so we had to showcase our talents, but she was effective. She was very talented at her job. We were just better. And so I don't hold things personally against these people, and I wish them well. Some of their crew is working against us now in the Florida governor's race. Again, they'll be unsuccessful, but people got to eat. So they got to do what they got to do.
Got to do what you got to do. So you just got married. I've seen rumors floating around that you might consider running for office. Would you?
Potentially one day. Definitely not for any of the rumored seats that that are out there.
Not right now, but one day maybe.
Yeah.
In
probably.
Florida, possibly?
I don't know. Maybe. That's where home is now. I've been in Florida for 7 years. But who knows what? Wisconsin will always be home for me. And there's a big governor's race in Wisconsin in this upcoming November. So we'll see what happens with that race. I'm wishing Tom Tiffany well. But it's a very tough state to win for a Republican. Scott Walker did us no favors. He set the Republican Party back big time. And then you had a guy named Pauline Ryan who, was a lot of people thought removed his testicles, but I can't confirm that. But no, he set the Republican Party back big time. Like when I was young, growing up in Wisconsin, we were like the mecca of the GOP. We had Walker, we had Ryan, we had Priebus, we had Ron John. Like every state wanted to be like Wisconsin. And I really don't know what happened. And then Wisconsin just started losing. The GOP in Wisconsin just started losing. Ron John somehow figures out how to win, and the president figures out how to win. But the rest of the Republican Party in Wisconsin, at least statewide, really struggles. And so, it's always been my intention to stay in Florida as long as the president, is active and around. But I do see a world in which I would move home to Wisconsin because a lot of my family's still there and many of my friends are still there. I don't know. My wife comes from Los Angeles, so moving her from Los Angeles to Florida wasn't that big of a move. I'd need to have a conversation with her to see if she'd ever want to move to Wisconsin. It's a little bit different.
Well, you let us know after you talk to her. I wanted to switch gears to something a little more somber. A Media Research Center poll released in December found that only 24% of likely voters know that Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk's accused killer, was left-wing. Why do you think that is? And what is your perspective on the increase in political violence that we've seen in recent months?
Well, it's terrible. And it's only coming from one direction. It's coming from the left. The left-wing violence in this country is out of control. And I think it continues to get worse because the media is almost complicit in it because they don't call it what it is. They don't call it left-wing violence. And so it empowers these crazy people. And it also seems to be the left-wing people who are more looped up on the transitioning medicine and I can't imagine that's great for the mental state of people. But it's terrible. That was one of the most horrific things I've ever witnessed. I was having dinner with Charlie Kirk 4 days before that happened. We were in South Korea, and it was fun to interact with him at this conference. What Charlie did, he touched the lives of millions of people all over the globe, and this group called Build Up Korea was simply a turning cat, thousands and thousands of miles away, and it was just three of us, four of us having dinner that night, and it was really an incredible conversation. So it's terrible that happened. It's sad to me that the media didn't take it as seriously as they probably should have. Same with the president being shot in the head.
Yep.
Like, I mean, they moved on from that story within days. We still don't know what the hell happened on that day. So, like,
Yeah, why don't we know?
great question. So, the media is certainly complicit and supportive of this left-wing violence, which is a shame.
Now, on the topic, you mentioned that there's a lot of these shooters or perpetrators of violence are transgender or identify as transgender. What do you think the Trump administration should do to deal with transgender violence?
Well, I think that the president and the administration have already done a great job of taking away some of these treatments for the youth. Right, when you start with this medicine when you're young, I mean, you're totally stunting your brain, hurting your brain. So I think that was a major step. I think declaring some of these organizations as terrorist organizations, whether it's Antifa, that's also important steps. But there's only so much. There's only so much that the federal government can do. I think it's really it's bigger than a political battle. It's really a spiritual battle. It's good versus evil, and unfortunately, a lot of people are moving away from God and finding more earthly things to follow, and it's sick. It's sad. But you also have a lot of these young people who have who subscribe to this doomer content, this left wing content. They don't think that they have a purpose in life, and they get into dark places, whether it's on Discord or Reddit. There's a lot of freaks out there, and they get inspired and they act and do crazy things. So I really don't know if it's a government answer necessarily. We really just need parents to be more involved. We need to have people find God more and find more of a purpose outside of their whatever crazy pools that they're in online.
Absolutely. Now, last question for you, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. Who would you most like to see primaried in their upcoming election?
Well, most of my foes have left, vanquished. Adam Kinzinger, who, by the way, looks awful. Looks like he's been drinking a lot of alcohol. He takes these selfies. He looks very bloated. And Liz Cheney, she's gone. We miss her. There's a guy. His name's Dan Crenshaw. Any Dan Crenshaw fans in this room? Nice. So. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't look like he's in a strong position, and his race is March 3rd. So we'll see what happens there. And what's happening with Tony Gonzalez, which is kind of fascinating.
Crazy.
And I know the president. I think he endorsed him, but like Tony Gonzalez is not a good Republican. I think he loves amnesty. He loves everything Rhinos love. And I mean, it's terrible. Like, if this relationship with the staffer is true, like, that's not a good situation.
So those are your top two.
Yeah, probably.
Right. Well, Alex, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I know everyone has questions for you, so we're going to open it up to the audience. At this time, we'll cut the live feed, and then you guys can ask your questions. So anyone have one for Alex?
Thank you.
Yeah, right up here in the front.
Yeah, so
wait 1 sec for the mic. Sorry.
So earlier you were talking about how certain podcasts don't have an audience that you think is beneficial for Republicans to go after. But in the Trump era, the one area we have lost ground in is suburban and women who used to be a strong conservative voting bloc. Shouldn't we have a social media strategy